Hey there, gang. Now, if you're the kind of person that likes to listen to two middle-aged nerds talk about their favorite collectible card game, you have come to the right place. We're back with a brand new name and a tired old attitude. Welcome to Head Games.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is the Zombie Apocalypse, and if you really want to figure out my name, you need to stop sacrificing me on the turn you play me.
They get a basic land, though. It makes it so good.
I know, but it hurts me.
It hurts. Hello, my friends and opponents. Some call me Jeterek, some call me Tim. Just don't call me late for the Commander game, because I almost never am.
That's true. I have never seen you late before in my life. Thank you for joining us today on the new and improved Head Games Commander podcast, where we talk about the Magic the Gathering Commander format. So, Tim, what are we talking about today?
Today, to formally celebrate the launch of our new brand, we decided to ask ourselves a deep philosophical question: what cards would be in your signature spellbook? So let's start with a little background. Between 2018 and 2020, Wizards of the Coast released 3 signature spellbooks, small reprint releases themed around a specific planeswalker. Each one had 8 cards that were meant to represent or kind of define the character. They didn't last long. They were sort of replaced later by a product called Commander Collection, which gave us the last 2 colors in the cycle. So we did end up sort of getting all 5 colors over time. Weirdly enough, the Commander Collection products still had a Planeswalker in them, so it really ended up just being more of a rebrand.
Yeah. So, interesting thing, Sheldon Menery did have a spellbook made for him specifically as a secret layer. Sadly, you cannot no longer purchase it. It was pretty cool, so keep an eye out for those singles out there in the wild. I think the signature spellbook was pretty cool. So we thought it would be a fun experiment. What would be in our signature spellbook? So if we were a magical planeswalker, what spells would really tell everyone what we are? So we picked 8 cards that we love and played either in the past or play it now. So Tim, what was the first card in your signature spellbook?
So I started out with Tireless Tracker. This is a green creature. It's 2 and a green to cast, so a total of 3. It has a landfall trigger, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you investigate, which means you make a clue token. It's an artifact token that you can pay 2 generic mana to sacrifice it and draw a card. And then second text line, whenever you sacrifice a clue, you put a +1/+1 counter on Tireless Tracker. It is a 3/2. So I remember, again, like when this card was released, and I do play enough standard to care at least a little bit about cards that go through the standard cycle, and I was a huge fan of this card when it went through, even though if you remember that time period, it wasn't necessarily that much of a contender at the time. But it represents something that I think is important to what I usually like to do, which is to have some sort of value engine rolling. This one is not a particularly powerful engine. It's just a reliable one. You know that you're going to play lands. You know that you're going to want to draw cards at some point, and I feel like this is exactly the kind of card that bridges that middle game. It is a great mid-range kind of card. I find myself putting it in just about every commander deck that has green in its color identity, even when maybe it doesn't belong there.
You know, there's also just something about the fact of getting a rectangle on your board every time that you play a land, whether it be a clue or food or treasure, whatever, just having that extra rectangle that can do something differently. And the fact that it gets a +1/+1 counter, even if you sack it to a Car Clan Ironworks or something like that, it's still going to get the counter. It just has to be sacrificed. It doesn't have to be sacrificed to draw a card, which is and I've seen Tireless Tracker get so big.
Right.
Like, it's just a great card. I'm pretty similar to you too. I do put Tireless Tracker in decks that probably don't need a Tireless Tracker, but there's just something about, I love clues. Clues are one of the greatest things of all time.
And really, like I did this kind of, I feel like this is one of the pioneers of that kind of effect that we've seen so much in the years since then, which is a card that just makes rectangles. And we started out with clues, and then we got treasures, and we got food, and we have all these different, and there's even more now. There's
Blood,
blood, and
junk,
there's
and
junk.
yeah,
Yeah, there's so all these different things, and this to me feels like the, kind of the proto version of those, where
hmm,
it was a repeatable way to make that extra piece of cardboard, which on face value doesn't seem that strong, but especially when you're talking about a format like Commander, where you are able usually to get to a pretty large amount of mana, this becomes a lot more potent at that point, because you actually start using those clues to turn into cards when you don't have anything else to do. So again, it can kind of get you back from being behind. It's really good with fetch lands. Like lots to love
yeah.
about this. But again, it's just that mid-range card that, it's not flashy. It's there when you need it. It's
Oh yeah.
reliable, like your
Right.
like your favorite T-shirt.
That's right. Yeah, like again, like there's been times in games where like I have like 6 clues sitting there and then I'm like, dang, my cards in my hand literally don't do anything. Let's just start cracking
Right.
some clues.
Yep. Yep. And that's how we're gonna get out of this.
Yep.
All right. All right, Zombie, you're up. What's your first card
All
in
right.
your signature spell book?
So my first card is Endless Whispers. It is a 4 mana enchantment. It's 2 and 2 black. It reads, each creature has, when this creature is put into a graveyard from play, choose target opponent. That player puts this creature card from that graveyard into play under his or her control at the end of turn.
What does
So
that do?
so it means when you kill things, they don't stay gone. And it's hilarious because I actually used to have I guess it was standard at the time. So I had a standard deck where I played Endless Whispers and I would ramp out to Phage the Untouchable, which is an amazing card. It's a legendary creature. When it enters the battlefield, if you didn't cast it from your hand, that player loses the game. I had that card in it. I also had Leveler, which is a 5 mana artifact creature, 10/10. When it enters the battlefield, you mill your whole library into your graveyard. So then you would sacrifice that creature and give it to your opponent, and then they would immediately die. And it was just one of the most janky standard decks that got me into top 8 so many times because like it's a really hard combo to interact with in like a normal standard format. So it was just something that I love to do, and it ensues chaos. Even if you have it in Commander, it's just like let's just see what happens.
So um is it the fact that it's a combo that's hard to interact with? Is that what you think is what you like most about it, or is it the chaotic element?
So now that I am no longer in that standard set or like in that standard like scenario, I like the chaos that it ensues. But like, I mean, I have a Phage the Untouchable deck, so it's in the list.
I'd be very interested to see what could potentially do in a deck that was more than just mono black
Mhm.
and had the ability to kind of give away creatures
Right?
in that way. I can't. I look forward to your research on building a deck that's like that, because that sounds very you.
Yeah,
Like finding a deck that
it's a very
takes
neat
all the
card.
terrible cards, all the terrible creatures to give to other people, and just gets to Endless Whispers and gives them all away.
It's not even that. Like just like you kill something on your opponent's side and then they have to give it to someone. And like if you're playing a deck that has ETBs or something like that, it's just what are they gonna do? There's not really
Right.
much they can do.
There's hard it's crazy hard choices, and when you add it to the multiplayer format, it really does. I mean, I've seen it come out a couple of times, and I know that it draws a lot of attention
It,
because people don't want to have to make those choices of what's
it
going to happen
immediately
when all
gets
the
removed
creatures
every
die.
time that I play
Yeah,
it. It immediately gets
yeah.
removed, which is interesting. So if in response to them killing your creature, you do this, it's a delayed trigger, so they would still get the creature on their end step if you have like a sack outlet you could respond with or something. So interesting factoid about this card. I really, oh
Neat.
dude, this card's great. So Tim, what do we got next on your card list?
This one could have been first, and I think that because I think it's so representatory of who I am as a player, and it is Aetherworks Marvel. So this is a 4 mana legendary artifact originally printed in Kaladesh. So it's from the energy set, so it has energy in what it does and how it activates. So, but it can fuel itself. That's what makes it, I think, a playable card. So whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get an energy. You may tap Aetherworks Marvel and pay 6 energy. Look at the top 6 cards. You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost. Rest on the bottom in a random order. So you get to look at the top 6, play a spell for free when you get to 6 energy. This was part of a very actually well-known and powerful standard deck at the time that was either Teamer, blue, green, red, or Sultai, blue, green, black variants, with the intent to get this out and get a Ulamog, Ceaseless Hunger, or Emrakul, the Promised End, into play on turn 4. So at that time, that's what I was doing because I really love the kind of random nature of this. Like the looking at the top 6 cards and playing something for free has this kind of spinning the wheel feeling to it. Like I don't know what I'm gonna get. Maybe I get nothing, and sometimes you do, and that's terrible. But sometimes it just works exactly. The machine runs perfectly, and that is the game I like to play. I love it when I put together a machine that is essentially random, but still does what I want it to do. So in Commander, the level of randomness gets amplified a lot. So it's like way bigger hits, way bigger misses. Like it's very possible for this to do very little. But the deck that I run it in these days is a deck that plays with a lot of treasures. So when I'm sacrificing those treasures, as I'm going to do, I'm getting energy for every treasure I sacrifice, and then I'm going to be able to use this every turn. So it's basically just a free spell off the top 6, which can also be cast at instant speed due to the way the card is worded. So that's why I like it so much.
Dude, there's just so many things to love about this card. Like if you're running an aristocrat style deck, it goes in it. If you're running a treasure deck, it goes in it. If you're running a clue deck, it goes in it. Food deck, it goes in it. There's so many decks that this thing can go in, and like it's just the fact that you get the top 6 cards and it's completely random just screams like dinosaur with a laser beam on his head kind of Commander, where it's just like who the hell knows what's going to happen next. And it's just so much fun to play with. It's so much fun to see, like just the sitting at the edge of your seat waiting for it to resolve. Like, oh my god, there's just so many good things about this card that I don't blame this. And I've seen you play this card so many times, and it's a very you card.
And I think that it, like, especially in Commander these days, it's not necessarily seen as a giant threat because of the random nature of what it does.
Right.
Because you're spinning the wheel on the top 6 cards. Those 6 cards could be lands, and they are sometimes. It is totally possible to hit absolutely nothing in this, or hit a mana dork or a soul ring and have it be very, very sad. But that's the kind of Commander I like to play, where again it feels like I'm building up this energy, I'm doing this incredible thing, and it ends up being a bird of paradise.
Or sometimes it's an old Nullbone or something, or
sometimes it's an old Gnawbone. That's right. Sometimes sometimes it's
an Ulamog to Ceaseless Hunger. Who would have saw that one coming?
Right. So and again, what I really think is the reason that I still play it to this day is that it is the kind of Commander game I want to be playing, where it is not optimized. Optimized players are not putting this card in their deck. No. Unless you are a dedicated energy deck, you're not putting this in there. And even then, it's not necessarily the best thing you can be doing. So, but it's flavorful, and it makes for goofy and random scenarios, which is what I'm here for.
I mean, in the Commander format, our games aren't about optimization. They're about the cool stories that come from it. And Aetherworks Marvel is one of those cards that just have a story stapled to it every time you see it.
True. All right, you're up again. What's the next card in your
All right,
spell
so
book?
the next card in my list is Astral Slide. It is a 3-mana enchantment, 2 and white. Whenever a player cycles a card, you remove target creature from the game. If you do, return that creature to play under its owner's controller at the end of turn. So, the reason why I love this so much is because I had this deck in standard because I'm an old head, where like you would get multiple astral slides. Like it was such a control deck that wasn't even funny. So like you would have cards like Eternal Witness to return your cycling cards back from your graveyard to your hand. You had Angel of Despair, which um destroyed a permanent upon leaving and entering and leaving, so it would just destroy everything. And like it was just so hard to fight against. There was another red enchantment that when you cycled, you paid a mana and dealt damage, and that's how the deck won. Like you just held the board off for as long as you want, because let's be real, you're doing it all day. And
Lightning Rift, I think.
yeah, I think you're right. But Astral
Yeah,
Slide's
I remember that deck.
like Tim, it's just like a value engine piece. I have a deck built around this in Commander. However, I don't play it very often because once I have Astral Slide out on the battlefield, the answer to everything is I have a response. And that's not necessarily something fun that you want to play against. So I don't play it very often. And it's also a very scary commander. It's Zur the Enchanter. So I can search for him because it costs 3 mana. There's also there's Astral Drift too. That's exactly the same as this, but it can also cycle itself to just blink a creature too. So um again, it's just a fun card. It's a value engine piece. Cycling is just a underrated like ability that gets tacked onto some cards and stuff. And I just love everything that this card can do.
I think that like there's definitely some nostalgia goggles on here, which is not to say it's not a great card because it
Right.
certainly is. And under the right circumstances, this is a like it's a build around, right? Like your deck has to be able to do the things. Because if you don't have any cycling cards, this card literally does nothing. But if your deck is built around cycling cards and you have a critical mass of them, it's going to do some really really fun things.
Yeah.
And I remember that standard deck very very well. And actually, it's funny. One of the cards I'm going to talk about later definitely goes hand in hand with this one. And that's part of what made me like the card to begin with. This seems to me to have that same quality that Tireless Tracker did,
Yep.
where it is a value engine for sure, but because of the clause that it returns it at the end of the turn, it makes it so that you can't. I'm going to eat my words here, but I don't know that you can create an infinite loop with it,
No, not
or
with
at least
slide.
or at least one that happens all in that moment, because you have to wait for it to happen. You do end up with loops, and you end up with this incredible value
Right.
engine as a result of it. So again, 3 mana spell creates this value engine as long as the rest of your deck is capable of doing the thing with it. So
That's why Eternal Witness is so good with it, because you just return the cycled card that you cycled to blink it.
right.
And it's just like, damn, this guy's never gonna have an empty hand ever.
Mm-hmm.
So just a great standard deck. In Commander, it's pretty busted if you build a deck around it. I know because I've done it. But yeah, I can't gush enough about the standard deck. It was so fun. Now I had a twist on the end of mine that we'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with another signature spell of mine, so we'll talk about how the deck won later. So
Right.
Tim,
Right.
so Tim, what's your next card?
So it turns out I really liked the set Shadows over Innistrad, because here's my second card from that set. Tireless Tracker was printed in that set originally. So the second one is the Gitrog monster. You probably, if you played enough Commander, chances are you've come across the Toad at some point or another. The Gitrog monster is a Golgari, a black-green legendary creature, 5 mana total, 3 a black and a green. It's a frog horror. It's a 6/6 with Death Touch. The Death Touch has always felt irrelevant, and I feel like it's always going to feel irrelevant. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice the Gitrog monster unless you sacrifice a land. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, draw a card. The reason I like this, it wasn't my first Commander deck, but it was maybe my second. And when I built it, it's immediately broken because it's really hard to have this be your commander without immediately having it be a combo deck.
Yep.
Because you can make it so that you draw your whole deck by milling your whole deck very, very, very easily, and this becomes a graveyard matter commander very, very easily. It's got a value engine built right into it. It's got kind of a ramp engine built right into it. There is the 1/2 of you can to put extra land in, but you also have to sacrifice one each turn. So it's tricky, but what I love about the Gitrog monster is that same thing that I love about Tireless Tracker is it is a value engine by itself. It is a value engine with doing nothing more than playing lands. And so you are because it causes you to sacrifice a land on your upkeep, so you're going to draw that extra card every turn, so you're getting extra value there. So that is the quality to it, that it is one of those middle of the road cards that creates a lot of additional value. It draws you cards. It's very, very ripe for being broken, for being part of a combo again, I remember building that deck and very quickly having it become degenerate and having it be like a combo deck what I should say about it is that I learned in building that deck that I didn't want to play a commander deck that was going to be really linear, that was going to be the same thing every time. And that is exactly what that deck became. It was, how fast can I get to the combo, because I will win as soon as I get there. And I very early on learned from this card that that's not what I want to do. So this card is not going to be my commander probably ever again, unless I try to build something competitive, and I don't know it's good enough to be in that ring.
Actually, in CDH, it's a thing. Yeah.
Is it a thing?
The combo is very different now than what you did, but it's still a combo that involves like Eldrazi Titans and reshuffling your graveyard and doing other things. I don't know exactly how it wins, but it's very different.
Right. No. I remember looking up the Eldrazi Titan version of it because I had built the version that through a bunch of chicanery and weird interactions, creates a creature that has a bunch of activated abilities of creatures in the graveyard, such that it can create infinite mana and use that infinite mana to kill everyone.
Yeah, I think the card was Necrotic Ooze was the creature.
Necrotic Ooze is the one that gets all of the activated abilities.
The three creatures that you had in your graveyard, I don't remember what they were, but
yeah, I'd have to look them up, but well, like again, it was ways to make mana, ways to use mana, and one of the ways to use mana is to kill everybody. So, but again, I'll never play it as my commander again, I don't think. But I love it in the 99 because it really does create that value. Before we started filming today, we just realized I probably should have this in a deck I'm playing now, and I missed the opportunity. It's going in as soon as we're done.
As soon as we're done. I'm surprised it hasn't made it there yet.
I'm gonna do it right now.
Right meow. But no. But seriously, the Gitrog monster is the favorite creature that I search for in my Windgrace deck, and if that's not telling you something, you're listening to the wrong podcast. But no, it's my favorite.
This is the This is the Venn diagram for us, I think. Like when we talk about like our role as Magic players, like when you put our circles over each other, it's Gitrog monster in the middle. This is where Zombie and I agree, and we agree on a lot. It's probably a much wider overlap, but this is right in the middle.
That's the very middle, right there. Yeah, there's nothing wrong about what you just said. So, So my next.
All right.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. You're up.
So my next card. In fact, a lot of people see me cast this spell all the time. It is Brain Geyser. It is X and 2 blue for sorcery. Target player draws X cards. I could have put a lot of cards in this slot. Like Stroke of Genius is another one that I played all the time. Rush of Knowledge is another really cool card that I like that I was half tempted to put in this slot too, which is another sorcery. It costs 5 mana, but you draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. So,
I feel like that's different enough, though, that Brain Geyser
yeah,
is, like that's different enough. I think Brain Geyser operates in a very specific space.
right. So, well, what my point is, this slot, I really wanted to have a card that just says draw all the cards. Like this is what I wanted, right? Um, and I really couldn't turn down Brain Geyser because it's literally in my command zone in my favorite deck that I have built right now, which is my Garth One Eye deck, which allows me to cast Brain Geyser at instant speed. It just makes it even better. So, but I don't know who in their right mind doesn't just like drawing a lot of cards. Like in order to win a game of Commander, you have to draw all the cards. That's what I was told when I was a kid. So,
Yeah, they weren't wrong. I mean, like card draw wins games is how we used to say it, right?
mm-hmm.
Like that was the old adage. And the reason that I mentioned that Russian knowledge is different enough is because while yes, they both draw you a lot of cards, Russian knowledge has a ceiling.
Yes.
And the ceiling is the highest mana value spell in your deck.
Right.
So Brain Geyser's ceiling is higher because it is as much mana as your deck can eventually produce. Which something that you do is you build decks that generate a lot of mana.
I was about to say,
So
my adage is whoever spends the most game or the most mana in a game wins the game. So why not have a card that I can spend as much mana as I damn well please to draw all the cards? So spending mana, drawing cards wins you games. So why not have one card that just says, "Here you go"?
right, and I think that that's why this card in particular
Yeah.
is. I mean, yes, it's in yes, Garth lets you cast it and makes it an instant, which really it makes it better than Stroke of
Mhm.
Genius, right? 'Cause that's the only difference, right? Stroke costs one more, but is instant, right?
It costs one more, and it's a blue and 2 colorless and X.
Right, but it's an instant.
But
Yeah,
it's an
I mean,
instant, yeah. So
right.
another reason why I brought this up is because I had a type 1 deck that I used to play with another card from my list, so I can't tell you exactly what the list was, but the I had a lot of artifacts in that deck, and I had Tolarian Academy. I almost said Tolarian Community College because I've been watching a lot of him lately. So I actually mean Tolarian Academy, where I'm tapping
Right.
blue. So like it would be like turn 3, I'm playing Brain Geyser and drawing like 8 cards, and then just emptying out my hands again. So there's reasons why there's lots of reasons why I picked this one in particular, but yeah, that was a fun deck. So Tim, please tell me, enlighten me. What's your next card?
My next card is, I think, the only planeswalker on our combined list. So, and again, this fits into our Venn diagram
Yep,
where we
I
both
almost
play
picked it. I almost picked
where we
it.
both where we both play this card quite a lot. So it is Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. It is a planeswalker. It is 8 colorless mana, 7 loyalty to start, +2 loyalty. Ugin deals 3 damage to target creature or player, -X. Exile each permanent with CMC or mana value X or less. That's 1 or more colors. And then -10, gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, put up to 7 permanents from your hand onto the battlefield. I like this card. This card has nostalgia value for me. Again, I was playing a lot of limited. I had actually just gotten back into the game when this came out. So I had a hiatus from the game that ended with Cons of Tarkir, and it was because life reasons stuff shows up.
Yep.
But at some point, I was doing okay again, and my life was going well. And I heard that they were going to reprint fetches in Khans of Tarkir, and I thought to myself, this is a great moment to jump back into the game because I know that those are usually really valuable cards. So I started playing at Khans again. Fate Reforged comes right after it, and I'm playing at a oh my god, at a draft, and I open a pack of Fate Reforged, and it's Ugin and a polluted Delta. And I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I have to pass one of these."
That's
But
rough.
the store manager walked over to me and he said, "No, you don't." And he gave me a fresh pack to draft with and let me buy that pack.
That's
Like,
amazing.
it's the broest move ever. It was so amazing. It was it was
That's
it was it was at War and Pieces. Rest in peace.
oh,
I'll
that's
never
amazing.
I'll never forget it. Like, it was such a great moment. And I still have that Ugin. I still have that very same card. It's been in my binder ever since. And I found a lot of different homes for it. It's just objectively a good card. It can literally go in any deck. It is powerful enough. Like, if you want your top end to be something that can potentially be a board wipe, can potentially be spot removal, and if left alone long enough, can draw you a bunch of cards and end the game. Eugene's your guy.
All right, look, I'm going to be quick on this one because I love this card to death. It's my favorite board, one of my favorite board wipes of all time, and the fact that like it's not that hard to get to the ultimate, and if you're getting to that ultimate, you're just winning the game. So
Yep.
that's really all I have to say about Ugin. He's my favorite board wipe.
Three turns. If any kind of manipulation, you can do it. You can do it faster than that. So that's two active. That's on his third turn. First turn activation +2. Second turn activation +2. Third turn ultimate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can
And it
plus to
lives.
it and then proliferate it, you can actually do it on its second turn. Yeah, the way that I'm talking about, it lives. So you're
Oh,
absolutely right. No
such.
question, this is among the most powerful cards on our list here. But I put it there because, again, I know that Zombie and I are both huge, huge fans of this card. I'm not putting it in every deck because I think I only have one of them. But boy, I love it when I see it.
I was about to say I think I only have it in one deck too. I think it's only in my Windgrace deck.
Yeah.
But it just
Yep.
fits so well there too. So,
Mhm.
anyway,
All right, you're next. What's up?
so my next card on the list is Aloran. It is 4 mana enchantment. It's 2 and 2 green. Any player may play a creature card with total casting cost 3 or less whenever he or she could play an instant and without paying its casting cost. Okay, so the one thing that I love about this card is A, it's group huggy. B, it's absolutely terrifyingly powerful. So, this is back when I back in the day, like everything I'm talking about today has just been nostalgia glass, like rose tinted nostalgia glasses. Okay, so
Yeah.
I had an Aloran deck back in the day. It was an Aloran Storm deck, and what I would do is I would ramp out to Aloran. I would cast Cavern Harpy 5 billion times, and it was such a hard combo to interact with because there wasn't great enchantment removal back in the day, and basically the first game was free and I won almost every game because of how fast it could do it. But I would play Cavern Harpy 5 billion times. They couldn't kill the Cavern Harpy because I could pay 1 life to just bounce it back to my hand before the spell resolved. But Cavern Harpy returns a blue or black creature to its owner's hand, so I would just return itself. And then I would cast Tendrils of Agony. And it was a really fun deck. I actually built a commander deck with Aloran in it. And I tried to make it janky, Tim. I tried. It didn't work.
I
So,
remember. I only saw it. Actually, I don't know that I ever actually saw you play it. You just told me that what was happening with it and that it was winning too fast.
well, I could win on turn 3, like by accident. So what happened? Well, so what the deck I'm talking about was it was a 14th Doctor deck, and since the 14th Doctor cost only 3 mana, I would play the 14th Doctor. I would mill 14, or I would look at the 14 cards, mill it into a Doctor, and if I got the third Doctor, I would have to get like a cavern harpy or something that would return a blue creature to its owner's hand, or like um the I forget the artifact that whenever a creature enters the battlefield you can return another.
Stone Curio.
Yeah. So it was based off of that. So what I would do is I would get all 14 doctors. I would have almost infinite mana, based on my life total. But I could use those mana to pop food tokens that the third doctor could make. So like it was almost nearly infinite mana. And then I would play Gallifrey Stands, return all those doctors to my hand, play all those doctors, and get a second upkeep at the end of my turn and win with um, Gallifrey Stands. Or I would turn all my creatures into doctors, mill all my creatures, and win with Mortal Kombat. So it was just a fun and interesting deck. Uh, but again, it was C80H kind of level stuff. So I was like, okay, it's a little too powerful, but I love Alluring.
It's this one's tough for that reason. So a couple notable things. First, I believe it is the most expensive card on our combined list, and it's not incredibly high. It's in 40 plus. But there's a reason for that, and it not the least of which is it's really only had a couple of printings. I'm not even sure that it's had more than one. I
I
know we
think it's
saw
just
the
one. Yeah, I don't know
yeah.
what Tempest Remastered is.
I think you're right. I think it might be an online thing, but correct us if we're wrong here. But Alurin was originally printed in Tempest,
Yep.
which is, before the era most of the people who are playing the game these days remember. And this was an era where you would have, like Tempest, by and large, you look at the whole set, there's probably, you can count on one hand the number of cards that are decent or cards like Alurin that are absolutely incredibly powerful. And then the rest of it's really terrible. And that was what they were still figuring out how to design sets in a way that the power level was more balanced. And they made a lot of mistakes along the way. So, and here's Alurin, and really, like, it did not take long. It really didn't take long for people to do degenerate things with this
Right.
card. And it only got worse from there because then once we did get from Plane Shift, we got Cavern Harpy, and it's a 2 card infinite ETB combo.
Yep.
So anything else that you're trying to do at that point just becomes very, very easy to achieve. So it's definitely a combo enabler, but I feel I loved this card very well at some moment in my career, but it's hard to play it in a casual commander format.
Funny story. The next card on my list is also originally printed in Tempest.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, Tim, we've talked enough about Alluring. I think it is your turn.
Okay,
Tell me what
so
your next spell.
we alluded to this earlier, and again, so I'm gonna talk about Eternal Witness, and
Yeah.
I again, this was one of those moments where I wrote down the card and I said, "Am I just gonna go with this card that everybody knows is good and everybody plays it?" And the answer is yes. The answer is yes because I was there when the old Magic was written. And I was a proponent of this card absolutely out of the gate. Like I was running 4 copies of this as soon as I was able to do it. I was there 5,000 years ago. Eternal Witness, everybody knows it, but I'm going to read it. It's 1 and 2 green for a creature. It's now a human shaman. When Eternal Witness enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's a regrowth with legs, which is in every way better than regrowth because you can more easily abuse this with cards like Astral Slide.
Mm-hmm.
As Zomby mentioned earlier, there was a fantastic Selesnya value engine deck. Like that cycling deck had a Selesnya variant, had a green-white variant, and that was my jam because I love value engines, and this one was such a good one. And of course it's become a commander staple because there's so many decks that can abuse this in the same way, where they can bounce it or they can recur it or they can do any number of other things, copy it, do any number of any other things. It is a versatile tool in a toolbox type deck. Can't say enough good things about it.
I already gushed about this card earlier in my Astral Slide deck. I mean, I'm pretty sure when it was in standard, it also was in the Tooth and the Nail deck as well. That
Sure.
that did Kiki Light Steel or Dark Steel at the time.
Right.
So, I mean, I think Eternal Witness, and it was so good because like in the standard set, it worked with you could then clamp it and draw 2 cards off of it.
Right.
It was
Right.
just like there was a lot of mistakes that were made back in 2000. And I'm here for it. Okay, Wizards of the Coast. I want to go back to the good old days where you kept making mistakes and didn't put paragraphs on cards. Anyway, uh so the next card on my list is Living Death. I had 2 choices here that I could have put on my list. It was either Patriarch's Bidding or Living Death, but I use Living Death a lot more now than Patriarch's Bidding. It's just, in my opinion, I think Living Death is a little bit better. But I'll read Living Death for you. It's a 5 mana sorcery. It's 3 and 2 black. It says, set aside all creature cards in all graveyards, then put each creature is in play into its owner's graveyard, then put each creature card set aside in this way into play under its owner's controller. So apparently I did not get the Oracle text. The Oracle text is each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifice all creatures they control, then put all cards that they exiled this way onto the battlefield. That explains it a whole lot better than what I just read. I do apologize. I might just cut that bit out, but I probably won't. So
It's historical.
I
Gives us
know,
the
I know.
context. Gives us the context of how hard cards were to understand before they started to figure out wording. They still, I mean, it's still hard sometimes. Even the errated version of this, like, it still requires a little bit of brain energy
Right.
to actually suss out what it's trying to say.
So one thing that I love about this card, if you are behind and you just don't have any, like no one has creatures in the graveyard, it's just a great. Everyone sacrifices all their creatures, which is amazing because it gets around like heroic intervention or cards like that where it's like, oh, all my stuff is indestructible. So like realistically, it's a great board wipe. Every deck that I have black in it, it's in the list because I'm usually running big, scary, dumb creatures anyway. And it's not that hard to put creatures in your graveyard. But let me tell you, there's just so many things to love about this. And the reason why I was torn between this card and Patriarch's Bidding, my first ever standard deck was a zombie bidding deck where it was super aggressive in the early game where I would play a whole bunch of 1-drops, 2-drops. My 4-drop was Undead War Chief, so my zombies got big. I played Vengeful Deads, which whenever creatures died, they would get each opponent would lose a life. And then my top end was Noxious Ghoul, which whenever a zombie enters the battlefield, each non-zombie creature gets -1/-1. So what the idea of the deck is I beat face until I can't beat face no more, sacrifice all my creatures to Carrion Feeder, then sacrifice the Carrion Feeder to itself, and then bring everything back with Patriarch's Bidding. And at the time, there was a Goblin Bidding deck that every time we cast Patriarch's Bidding, we had to just call the judge.
Yeah, you need a third set of eyes on that just to keep it fair.
Yeah. So but like I've top aided so many standard events with Patriarch's Bidding, so like it was a hard choice, but I think I play Living Death more now. So I think, and I would like if I had to choose between those 2 cards in a list, I'm probably choosing Living Death every time now.
Well, sure. I think the Patriarch's Bidding is just way more narrow, and it was really, really good in that standard format because we had just had all of these like typal based,
Yep.
you had a very strong zombie deck, a very strong goblin deck, and so those 2 decks really, really benefited off of Patriarch's Bidding in particular. Patriarch's Bidding doesn't blow anything up. So, I mean, like looking at the versatility of Living Death, and you do play this card in almost every black deck you have, and really, I think that you've become very skillful at using it at a time when it like when it really the impact is solid.
Right,
I don't
right.
know that I've ever seen you use it and had it not be to your advantage, because it's a great card to kind of slow roll.
Mhm.
Like, you can make different choices knowing that you have it in your hand, kind of make some questionable blocks to keep your life total
Yep,
up. Just make different choices, making your, letting all of your stuff die without too much of a fuss, knowing that at some point you're going to wipe the board and all your stuff's going to come back.
yep.
Everybody else, they don't have graveyard shenanigans, are left holding the bag at that point. So I mean, Living Death in a multiplayer commander format just seems way better. And Patriarch Spitting is just, so it doesn't have the board wipe quality to it.
Right.
So I get it has the nostalgia, but I think I would agree that having to choose between them, two of them, Living Death kind of has your name on it.
Yeah, so in the near future, on one of the episodes of Commander with Randos and or Friends, uh, I used Living Death to such an effect that it was backbreaking for one of my opponents, and it was neutral for another, and then like not necessarily backbreaking, but it was just like it cleared his scary board and gave him one dinosaur, where I ended up pitching like 5 or 6 creatures to Dominus Rex Alpha. So like then I just got all of them back.
Boy, it's just so good in that deck. It's just so good in that deck
Yeah,
because you are always loading your graveyard with a number, like I mean, unless you're playing with another graveyard shenanigans deck, and even then, you like
I
you're
run Bajuka Bog,
yes,
so it's like okay, I
that's right.
right, and that's what I did.
You,
Bajuka Bogged
you
you.
you only get one Bajuka Bog, but the points, like, you have to have that. That's a narrow thing. But when you have somebody who is playing a graveyard deck, even if you don't have the answer, their deck has to be working for you not to be able
Right,
to do it. And as you said, it still was backbreaking for several other people. So it was a really good example of
right.
excellent play of that card.
So look forward to that episode coming soon
Yeah,
to
yeah,
a YouTube
absolutely.
channel near you. All right,
All
I
right.
I think we glowed enough about Living Death. So Tim, what is
This
your
one
next card?
is way simpler. It is like, and really, again, I think you could really age us by some of these cards because their first printing comes right in the same era. A lot, I mean, and not aside from Gitrog and Tireless Tracker, a lot of my list seems to come from this earlier era. So the next one is Phyrexian Arena, and it's, most people know this card by now. 1 and 2 black. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose a life. So if I'm not wrong, I think it was first printed in Apocalypse.
Yes, I think Apocalypse is correct.
So, and that was where I first saw it. And at the time, it was one of those cards that it came out, and everybody looked at it and they asked that question, like, is that good enough? Is drawing an extra card for a life really enough of a value gain over time to make it worth it? And I think the answer at the time was definitely yes.
Mhm.
It has decreased in power level over the years and, been reprinted innumerable times. Um, I do still think that it is a decent commander card.
Oh,
Like,
I
it
like it.
is
Yeah.
not it is not the flashy brain geyser, but it has the incremental value. And again, most of the time, people are gonna pick better targets for that disenchant.
Agreed.
They're not gonna look
Agreed.
at this. Um,
Yeah, this is definitely one of
so
those under the radar type cards.
And I think that, like, there's discourse about this card. There are definitely, I think there are solid arguments as to why you maybe don't play this. Like, maybe there are just better options, bigger, flashier things that you need your cards to be optimized. But I think that part of the game is sometimes playing the things that are a little less flashy
Yep.
so that those things don't get targeted. And that's where this one lives for me. I don't put it in every black deck because I don't think it's appropriate in all of them, but
Right.
it gets in there in quite a lot of them. I think that it is a solid card. That, again, if you're looking for themes, part of mine is that thing that's going to give you incremental value over time consistently.
Mhm.
Like, and I always talk about, like, in a vacuum. In a vacuum, is this card good? Does it do things without relying on other cards? And this is a really good example of, hell yes, it does. Like
Yeah.
this card in a vacuum draws you another card every turn. As long as it stays on the field, it is getting you more options. So that to me is very easy to determine that this is a net positive.
Yeah, so this card is just great. It's not great on turn 9, but like by that time if you're it's okay to have sometimes not great cards late in the game, but you're going to have that no matter what. You're going to have, you're going to draw your soul ring on turn 10 when it doesn't matter anymore. You're going to draw your early game ramp that you don't want on turn 10, but I mean that's
Yep.
just the beauty of variance and like the
Yep.
fact that it's just an additional card every turn and it's a slam dunk in Obeka, the new Obeka that I'm going to be building.
Oh,
I'm just
great. It is,
yeah.
isn't it?
Oh my god, I'm gonna draw so many cards from Phyrexian Arena. It's gonna be amazing.
That's amazing. Do it. Do
Oh,
it.
dude, I'm gonna kill myself. It's gonna be amazing because I'm gonna
All
put
right,
Blood
let's
Gift
keep it
Demons and stuff. Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
let's keep it moving. What's your next card?
everyone knows this card. It's Cabal Coffers. It's a land. You pay. It doesn't tap for normal mana. But you pay 2 mana. You add a black for each swamp you control. Again, this is another card that I had in my zombie bidding deck. When it like I would do extended like I had different lists for my zombie deck for each format, and like this was in my extended list. The first printing was Torment, and it was uncommon. And this was before Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, so like it was just a house. It was one of the
It's
greatest.
whack. It's
Yeah.
whack that it was uncommon and it is now a mythic.
Yep. Yep. So there's really not too much to say. I really wanted to put a land card in the list. I think Cabal
Sure.
Coffers is probably the one that I play the most. That when I get the opportunity to. I mean, it's a mainstay in Windgrace. It's just a really good card that adds a lot of mana. I was thinking about Glacial Chasm too, where it's just like
Yeah.
Turbo Fog. But I think I've played more Cabal Coffers in my life than Glacial Chasms, so I think this
Yeah,
like
you
it's just a
you
big
get
mana thing. Like
that's exactly what I was gonna say. You getting a lot of mana is much more your identity than hiding behind a thing, and you will hide behind the thing. Don't you'll hide
all
behind the
day, every
glacial
day.
chasm?
But
Of course you will. But you're going for the big splashy play first, so you'll go for the Cabal Coffers and
yeah,
the big play first. That's it's an interesting take on the question, and I think that if we were ever gonna like explore this again, I would love to have broken it down. I put
ooh,
the
I
on
got
this
an
that
idea
we're
for
going to
the
do a
next
lot of
one.
rules, but like a card of each card type.
That's what I was just thinking. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
that would make
yeah,
a great episode.
it would. Similar spirit, but a card of each type would be an interesting thing to talk about.
Oh yeah, for sure. But there's not really much more to talk about Cabal Coffers. We all know it. We all hate it, but I'm gonna play it anyway.
It makes a lot of mana.
It does. It goes burr.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. What's your next card?
My next card again, quite simple. My very, this is card 7 for me, so we're getting close to wrapping up. I included this because it is in the color identity that I consider myself to be most fond of, and I think it does the thing, as efficiently as you're going to get, and it is Assassin's Trophy.
Does it so
So
well.
Black and a green, it's an instant, destroy target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller may search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield. So the upside, and again, like when we talk about the format, right? When you're playing 1v1, a standard or another kind of format of that nature, giving your opponent a land means something very different than it does in a multiplayer
Yep.
format. So having a 2 mana spell that is the most efficient kind of spot removal, if you have a Glacial Chasm and you don't have a way to recur it, I can blow it up with Assassin's Trophy. If you have, it destroys every card that we've talked about so far. That's how versatile it is.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think I put this on the list, is that I really do want to nod to the fact that I do think that interaction is important, and I want to have interaction that is that is versatile. I don't
Yep.
like having interaction that's too narrow.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is just the perfect uh, interaction. Like, you can't get better than destroying any permanent. The only way it could be better is if it could hit your own stuff too, and you could use it
Right.
as a 2 mana ramp spell, because there's been
Right.
times where it's like, dang, I could really use another mana right now.
I'm with you, and I have
Uh,
often thought that it's not, and I actually think that that's even in the
I think
spirit of
it's better.
Golgari.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they could have had it be any target, and that would have been fine. I don't know why they made the choice they did, but still a strong card. Thankfully, been reprinted a bunch of times. It was
Yep.
expensive at one point, but it is it was just reprinted again in MKM. So nice and cheap now. You can pick them up whenever you want to.
Yep. I just love this card. I put it in everything too. So I definitely see you run this no matter what, like in every deck
If
that you
I'm in that
possibly can. Yeah.
if I'm in that color pairing, it's definitely it goes high on the list. I
One of
mean,
the few
first
things that
because
I will say, it is an auto include.
yeah.
Like, I don't say that very often, but when I do, it's true.
All right, what's up next for you?
All right. So my next card is the only creature on my list. Uh,
Very funny that that's the case.
so it is Mycosynth Golem. He is an 11 mana artifact creature, Golem. He is a 4/5. That's weird. I didn't have to say that all day, and now I have to like read stats and stuff. But it's not. It has a pretty good tech box. It has affinity for artifacts, which means the spell costs 1 less to play for each artifact you control. And then it also has another line of text that says artifact creature spells you play have affinity for artifacts. So the reason why this is on my list is because, again, in standard, a long time ago, I used to have this affinity deck. Like, I saw this spoiled when Fifth Dawn came out and immediately made this list. And it would be turn 1 artifact land ornithopter. Turn 2 it would have been like artifact land, pay 1 frogmite, pay another for Mirror Enforcer. Turn 3 like another artifact land, Mycosynth Golem, Bosch the Iron Golem, Darksteel Colossus. And then if that wasn't fast
Pass?
enough, huh? Yeah,
And then pass?
and then if that wasn't good enough, I would then use Rush of Knowledge to draw 11 cards and then play them all.
There it is. We got the
There it is.
callback.
We got the
There's Rush of
callback.
Knowledge.
Yeah. So when your average CMC in a deck is, and Rush of Knowledge was even really good in that deck because like pay 5, draw 7, even if I just had a Mirror Enforcer or whatever. So like the mana value in that deck, since everything had affinity for artifacts, was really, really high. I actually have an interesting story about this deck. I got invited to regionals way back in the day, and I brought this deck to regionals, and someone thought I was cheating because I had to shuffle my library for a reason. I don't remember what. And I accidentally dropped a Darksteel Colossus on the table. And they were like, well, why would an Infinity deck need a Darksteel Colossus? So he calls the judge over and demands to see my deck list. And and the judge is like, okay, what's going on? So I show him my hand. I was like, can I please just finish out my turn? And he's like, okay. So I play Mycosynth Golem, play Darksteel Colossus, and then pass the turn. And he was like, oh. One of the funniest stories of my competitive career. That was almost 20 years ago now. And I remember it
Sounds
like
right.
it was yesterday.
Yeah,
So,
the part of that that stands out to me is that like because your list had you in it, because your unique flavor was in the list and it wasn't just exactly what you might expect, it caused such a stir for that person to see that card and be like, "Oh, that can't possibly be right. That person has to be cheating." Only to be like, "Oh no, that I actually showed up here with a list that has Mycosynth Golem and Darksteel Colossus
yeah,
in it."
yeah.
Yeah,
This
I get
card
it.
does not work in Commander. Sorry.
Right.
I've tried it just, and I tried some weird stuff, but this just never worked for me. So I guess we're on our last card now.
This is it. This is it. This is the pièce de résistance.
Yeah. Future zombie apocalypse here. We had some technical difficulties with the recording of the first episode, so this is us redoing the end of the last episode or the first episode. So we hope you enjoy. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled program.
And now we are back after some very weird technical difficulties to discuss our final cards from our spell books. So my final card is another legendary creature, and it goes by the name of the Scarab God. So this is a 3, a blue, and a black. It's a 5/5 legendary god. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and you scry X, where X is the number of zombies you control, which isn't really what the card is trying to do, but it is a fringe benefit. The most important line of text is the activated ability to a blue and a black with just a colon, meaning you can activate it for as many times as you like based on how much mana you have available. You exile target creature card from a graveyard, create a token copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. And then if the Scarab God dies, you return it to your owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. So I have, as with a lot of my other choices, I have a lot of nostalgia for this card. I very much, when this was in standard, this was a card that I loved to play. I'm not alone in that. It was very popular at the time. But this was definitely occupying a really, really crucial part of my Magic world at the time. And if I'm in these colors, I'm probably trying to play this card. I actually tried to build this as a commander deck at some point, but was never really successful. I tried to build it as zombie tribal, but there's just better choices for zombie tribal commanders. But I still think that this is a solid, very fun middle of the road card. If you have a lot of mana to use, you can take over the game with this. And this is a way of stealing people's stuff in a way that doesn't feel as bad as other thieving feels, I think, because exiling something that's already been in their graveyard doesn't really feel like you're taking away something, just rather reusing something they've already lost.
Yeah, I mean, I love this card too because it's doing it's attacking on multiple levels. It's letting you look at cards. It's exiling cards from opponents' graveyards and getting their biggest, scariest creatures. And as you said, like stealing someone's stuff feels bad, but exiling a card from their graveyard and you happen to get a token copy of it feels okay. And what's nice about it, it's a token copy, so like they're never getting it back. Never. Unless if they have like a steal effect of their own, and naughty if they're doing things like that. So man, this card's just perfect in every level, and it's so hard to get rid of too, because like you can't kill it, you have to exile it because it will come back. And it's just chef's kiss perfect.
Yeah, it hits a lot of the notes in what makes me like a card. It's actually out of my normal kind of color pie. I mean, most Sultai is a color pie that a lot of people will say is among their favorites. Blue black as a dual combo is not a direction I usually go, but when I end up in 3 color, the Scarab God shows up for sure.
Now I have a question: is the Scarab God in your blue black deck? In Hidetsugu and Kairi, I don't think it is. It doesn't fit very well, but
and you've nailed it. I don't like that. It is my favorite Dimir commander I've ever built, and the Scarab God didn't make it in there because the creatures in that deck are a very specific lot. They need to either be a free sack outlet or they need to be a copy, like a clone creature of some kind. And if they're not doing one of those, or they need to interact with card drawing, like, they need to make it so card drawing is causing damage to my enemies. That's pretty much the only 3 kinds of creatures in the deck. So this one did not make the cut. I don't think.
I think we could find room for him. Maybe we'll redo the episode and we'll put that to add in.
Another editing towards the end of the video. We'll just change the ending to that one too.
Yeah, why not? Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and go into my last card here. And if you know who I am, this card makes perfect sense. It is Door to Nothingness. It is probably the best artifact ever printed. It is a 5 mana artifact. It enters the battlefield tap, and then you can pay white, blue, black, red, green, tap, sacrifice, door to nothingness, target player loses the game. I have a deck, Garth One Eyed, built completely around this thing. I played this in standard all the way back in what set was it originally printed in? Let's take a look here. It was originally
Was it fifth dawn?
Yeah, it was originally printed in Fifth Dawn, and I used to. It was a nasty deck too. Like I would play Rule of Law cards with Isochron Scepter. So like I just said no to everything to them.
Made a prison deck.
Oh, and it was the meanest thing you could ever do. And then it was just, I'm going to slow this game down long enough until I have 2 of each color. And it was just it's the best way to end a game. What makes it even better is when you're doing it to multiple people on the same turn.
It is another example of the kind of card that really is the pinnacle of your play style, alternate win conditions. And what's interesting about this one in particular is it does mean that you win. Mm-hmm. But it says that somebody else loses. There's something very different about that dynamic where, you're not causing yourself to win. You are one-shotting somebody regardless of their status, which is very cool in Commander, in a format where people can kind of pillow fort up in such a way where they maybe have an inordinate amount of life, or they, have Glacial Chasm and can't be damaged. Like, this gets around. It's also an artifact, so like protection from colors wouldn't necessarily work. There's still ways to get around it, but it's a very narrow hoop to jump through. It really is like point and click. You lose now.
So you've lost to this card a couple of times in your life in Commander. Is it a salty way to lose?
I don't think that it is, because it requires a pretty significant setup. Like, this is a true Rube Goldberg machine, where you have to set up all the dominoes and all the things that they knock over before you can actually successfully kill somebody. Even just killing one person is a trial to get to. And your deck's very streamlined, so it does it well, and it has a lot of powerful cards to do it. But you still have to jump through a lot of hoops to get there. So I'm never salty that way, because it doesn't really necessarily do it at hyper speed. It's going to take a couple of turns for you to get set up. I think it's impressive how fast it can do it, but it's not CEDH level. It's not killing somebody on the second or third turn. You need at least a couple turns to set up. And that's why I think it is essentially a combo deck. If you can get all the pieces together and I can't interact with it, I don't feel bad about that.
So, funny story. So when I was building I build a play mat every year with my kids playing Magic on mats of them playing Magic every year. So the last year I did my 2 most powerful decks. I did Windgrace and my Door to Nothingness deck. And in a one-on-one game, I think my Door deck killed my Windgrace deck in, I think, 6 turns. Like, just straight up blew a door in my son's face. So if it's one-on-one, it's pretty quick, because I don't have to jump through
something.
Well, I don't have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops, like copying the triggers or returning it from my graveyard and stuff. So
yeah, you just need to get it out, get it into play, and activate it, which that is still a tall order. Make no mistake about it. But only having to do it to one person does skip several steps towards the end.
Yeah. I just also like the fact that it's like pay 20 mana and win the game.
Right.
So that is the final card in all of our spell books. So what did you learn about yourself while doing this exercise?
So I will say that I don't know that I necessarily learned anything new. I definitely reinforced some things about myself. What kind of Magic player am I? What's really, what do I lean towards in terms of strategy and deck type? So I really am, I want value. I want to have cards. Like, a lot of my cards are mid-range based cards, are going to, help you kind of get through that middle part of the game. I very much like having things that will, draw you cards based on, based on your board state. So I definitely have a color scheme going on here. Almost all of my cards are in Sultai colors, with a couple of exceptions for colorless cards. But generally speaking, I am a mid-range player. I'm a value-based player. I do have at least a couple of cards that are just near and dear to my heart, because I either cracked them from a pack at a really memorable time, or just, they were an important part of my my development as a Magic player. So how about you? What have you learned about yourself?
So I learned we don't like red, like, at all, because there's not a single red card, and the only reason why there's one white card is because it's Astral Slide, guys. Like, come on. But I learned that what I did when I was younger really formed what kind of Commander player I am today, and it turns out he was a pretty cool guy back then, and I'm a pretty cool guy now. Not tooting my own horn or anything, toot toot. But no, I think it like, these cards really just speak for who I am as a player. It's clearly, like, I love to draw cards. I love to play things for free. I love big dumb mana stuff, and like alternate win cons, and like every single one of my choices involve something along those lines. So I think this list really speaks for who I am today. And as you said, like, all these cards are from my past or my present, and it just speaks for who I am.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this kind of thought experiment, and I think it's something that I would recommend that players kind of take, just think about something, especially Commander players, because we have the whole of the game to draw from, a very limited ban list in terms of what's not available to us. So, what are the cards that really, are meaningful to you? What do you find yourself leaning back towards whenever you're building Commander decks, or when you think about the most interesting or fun memories you have playing the game? What were the commanders you were playing then?
Right. Well, I think now's a good time to wrap things up.
Yes, friends, opponents, people who somehow accidentally listen to a whole show about Magic cards. It's time for us to wave goodbye. Thank you so very kindly for joining us on the Head Games Commander podcast. Remember, you can support the show by checking out all of our other videos on YouTube, joining our streams on both YouTube and Twitch, and hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Links are in the description.
But before we scoop things up, we want to ask you in the think tank one final question. What would your signature spellbook be? Let us know in the comments, and as always, thank you for playing along with us, and have a wonderful day. Bye.